I'm sure at this point we're all well aware of the ancient feud between the Greys and the Braithwaites in Red Dead Redemption 2. Two prominent rich families in the state of Lemoyne that have been fighting for so long that nobody's quite sure as to why they actually hated each other to begin with. Despite the initiation of the feud being lost to the ages, both families still hate each other with an undying passion. However, by 1899, amidst the malice, rose a secret love affair between Beau Gray and Penelope Braithwaite. What if I told you this was not the first time that a Gray and a Braithwaite fell in love? So sit back, as in this video we explore the story of Lucille Braithwaite and Douglas Gray. We learn of this love affair courtesy of a letter which you can find on this little island to the east of the Bayou, which is the opposite shore to the Sisika Penitentiary Prison, just a little ways north of Saint Denis. Though shallow, these waters are alligator infested, so be very careful. In fact, my hatred for the gators got the better of me and I started chasing them down with a shotgun. Make them fear you, kids. Oh look, eggs. Bang! When you arrive at the island, you will find a lockbox under a tree. It appears to have been dug up and left here for whatever reason. Inside this lovely little lockbox, you will find a letter addressed from Lucille Braithwaite to Douglas Gray. It is a faded letter, however, we can still make out what it says. Now, it reads as follows: "My dearest Douglas, the mere act of writing your name weakens me with longing. My exile in Connecticut has endured barely 3 weeks, but it already feels like a lifetime since I last saw your wonderful smile. Why should the family into which I was born and a surname that was imposed upon me dictate whom I can and cannot love? Like you always say, however, there are so many less fortunate and subject to far worse partiality and narrow-mindedness. Please take all that gold to the group I told you about. It should provide them with enough funding for another 2 years of operation so they can keep pressure on Congress to abolish the importation of slaves into this country once and for all. Our two families are so blinded by avarice and bitterness that they will not realise it is missing, or they will assume that the other has stolen it from them. Then come for me, my love, as we planned, and we will flee somewhere far away, down to South America or across Europe, where we can simply live our lives as Douglas and Lucille, not as Master Gray and Miss Braithwaite. Yours always, Lucille." Now, why they decided to choose an alligator-infested area for a dead drop location is completely beyond me. What happened to Lucille Braithwaite and Douglas Gray is also something that will elude us. However, it does tell us about how Lucille Braithwaite and Douglas Gray fought to end slavery, a practice in which their families had thrived on. The letter also gives us a bit of insight into what might have kicked off the feud to begin with, describing both families with the word avarice, which is defined as an extreme greed for wealth and material gain. And considering this was two large slaver families who lived basically right next door to each other more or less, their attempts at expansion to feed that avarice would essentially lead them to butting heads over land, among other things. But what Lucille Braithwaite and Douglas Gray did also ties into the main story of Red Dead Redemption 2, in which the Van der Linde gang find themselves looking for the gold that these families supposedly had, in the simplest way of putting it, only to discover that there probably wasn't any gold to begin with. However, it would appear as if there was. It's just Lucille Braithwaite and Douglas Gray stole it from both families and then used it to fund an organisation that was anti-slavery in order to help them pressure Congress into abolishing slavery in the very early 19th century. To what avail, we do not know. However, slavery was abolished in the United States by the year 1865. So Douglas and Lucille stole the gold from the families and funded an anti-slavery organisation, which in turn helped in destroying both family businesses, which is an absolute cold slap to the face, but if you're a slaver, that's exactly what you deserve at the very least. Presumably after they made off with the gold and funded this organisation, Lucille and Douglas Gray went on to live their lives completely separate from their families, just as the letter detailed, leaving the Grays and Braithwaites none the wiser, believing that each had stolen the other's fortune, something I believe is brought up in dialogue for the main story of Red Dead Redemption 2 at one point. But this is just a cool little detail that provides flesh to the main story in a way that only the most minute amount of players would ever find it, including me, evidently, as I would never have found it were it not for Noah Y8371296 on Twitter. Before we wrap up though, I want to highlight that if you return to the Braithwaite Manor after the end of Chapter 3, you will be able to find a lockbox with a gold bar inside it. Maybe that was all that was left. While not much is known about what happened to Douglas and Lucille in the decades following their robbery of the two families, they do resurface, having graves in Rhodes, detailing that Douglas passed away in 1831, and Lucille died some 6 years later in 1837. with her gravestone detailing her as a loving mother and wife. However, she's remembered under the name Braithwaite even still, so how successful her love affair with Douglas was, we will never know. So that concludes today's video on the original Braithwaite Gray love story. So thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, that would be super appreciated. If you want some extra content, maybe consider becoming a patron as well. There's some awesome stuff over there, though don't feel pressure to do that if you do not want to. In the end of the day, whether or not you think it's worth it is completely up to you. And I hope to see you all very soon with another video at some point.